Welcome to the Fear and Greed Business Interview. I'm Sean Aylmer. The labour market in Australia is still very tight. There's a lot of competition to find the best staff, and when you've got them, the pressure is on to retain them. So it helps to know what people are actually looking for in a job, because that in turn lets you create more targeted, more appealing job ads. Job site Seek has a very handy tool called the Laws of Attraction portal. It's based on an ongoing survey of thousands of Australians, revealing exactly what would attract them to a role. Caroline North is Seek's research manager for the Laws of Attraction survey. Seek, of course, is a great supporter of this podcast. Caroline, welcome to Fear and Greed.
Thanks, Sean. It's great to be here.
Cracking name, Laws of Attraction survey. Tell me, how does the portal work?
Yes. So Laws of Attraction is a study that looks at what motivates people to apply for a new job. What is it that they are looking for when they're considering their next role or their next company that they want to join and that they want to apply to? So the Laws of Attraction portal is a database that houses all the information that we collate from this study and serves it up to organizations, hirers, small businesses in a way that makes it really easy to digest and prioritize the types of information that they need to focus on when communicating so that they can attract the best talent and the top talent for their organizations.
Okay, so let's get into some of the findings from it. And I mean, the great thing about this is it's an ongoing survey, isn't it? So it's not a static product. It actually shows how things change. You've got access to huge amounts of information. Is it all about work-life balance or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. And especially when we think about over the last 10, 12 years that we've been running this survey and we see the changes in the shifts in what people are saying is important. So we've identified 12 drivers, if you like, so 12 buckets of information that people might be looking at. And one of those is work-life balance. And over the last 10 to 12 years, we've seen actually a relatively stable focus on what they're prioritizing. So typically, pre-pandemic, the focus was really about salary and compensation, work-life balance, and career development opportunities. So basically, that means if you're trying to attract someone into your company, make sure you're talking about those three things within your job ads, within your employment branding. Now, of course, we had a massive disruption when the pandemic hit. And interestingly, just before the pandemic, we were doing quite a big project here at Seek to understand what it is to have a productive and fulfilling working life. So we were speaking to a number of thinkers from all over the world, different industries, different aspects. And one of them that we spoke to really highlighted for us that over the last 100 years, not much had changed in why we work, what we're looking for, what our motivations are. And in fact, not since the invention of the light bulb had we really seen much change. So this stability that we'd seen in the data pre-pandemic was really to be expected. And it correlates to something that, we think about as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So our need for survival, putting food on the table, keeping a roof over our head, that's that salary and compensation piece. Our need for work-life balance, so that's the ability to kind of manage our home lives, our family lives, our relationships with our friends and communities. And then the career development aspect, which is that kind of personal growth, the opportunity for self-growth and having a look at that career development. Now, when we were doing this work and looking into it, kind of, the conversations around what would be a big disruptor. And this was just before the pandemic, just before the fires. And really, the sense was it would be a big environmental impact, would change our priorities around what we want to do and where we want to do it. Or things like big health impacts would have an impact on why we wanted to do so, big health scares and that sort of thing. And of course, we basically went into that. And our data reflected that we saw a change in people's priorities. So when we were in the pandemic, everything got very, very pointy. Salary and compensation and work-life balance really rose to the top of our focus. It was over 50% of our attention and our need for information was focused specifically around salary and compensation and work-life balance. Now, since the pandemic, what we've seen is quite a shift back to work-life balance, salary and compensation still at the number 1 and 2, but we've seen a shift now where work-life balance is actually the number 1 driver of attraction. And when we look into the detail behind that and we look at that period of time for the last 10 years, we really see that the big shift here is that work-life balance is no longer a gender-led story.
Okay, so just before we get into the breakdown of gender, because I'm interested, is work-life balance another way of saying flexible hours?
Absolutely. Flexibility is one part of it. But the great thing about the portal, if you dive in, under work-life balance, there are a number of different options and ways that you can look at work-life balance. So work-life balance means flexibility to some people. Maybe it's about working part-time or getting additional leave. It's having time in lieu. So flexibility can really incorporate a number of different factors. Where do I work? When am I working? There's no one size fits all for work-life balance.
Okay, so back to gender. Has it changed? I mean, I'm guessing that males are more likely to be more focused on work-life balance than they were previously.
Yeah, that is exactly right. So we're now seeing that males are placing comparable amounts of importance relative to the other things that they want to know about in relation to women, whereas before it was always about salary and compensation, prioritizing over work-life balance. And I think that's the reflection. There's probably a number of factors at play. It's the experience through the pandemic where the home life became everybody's life, not just a gendered role, which still typically plays out. I mean, we have ever increasing levels of female participation in the workforce. So we're at our highest, levels of female participation, over 62% in Australia. And we're moving into generations moving in and out of the workforce. So generations that have only ever grown up with women working in the workforce and having roles at home. And the pandemic, putting that pressure onto home life and work life and bringing it all together, made it an everybody experience, not just a female experience.
Stay with me, Caroline. We'll be back in a minute. My guest this morning is Caroline North from Seek. Okay, so if I'm an employer and I now know that work-life balance is pretty much established as a key factor in attracting staff and retaining staff, how do I write a job ad, for example?
Absolutely. So you've got to have all of your basic information in your job ad to be able to communicate what the role is. But you've really got to think about at what points in time are you communicating your job ad. So it doesn't just happen when you place it on Seek. Obviously, that's a really important part. But even when you place it on Seek, there are two components of that placement. There's a summary, a job ad summary, which will be served up to a candidate, to a job seeker, There's also the full job ad. So you really want to prioritize in your job ad the most important information that candidates are telling you. And that's where going into the portal and finding out what are their top 3 drivers say, and making sure that you've got messages in there that talk to, be it work-life balance, be it salary and compensation, be it the management and culture of the management in the organisation or the overall working environment, for example. But customise them. Don't just have the generic, one-size-fits-all comment. Talk about it in your terms, how it relates to your organisation, how it relates to your job.
And does that split, and I'm going to be attacked by salespeople here, but if you are advertising a sales role where remuneration may be more important, I am going to get attacked for saying that. However, I'm going to say it anyway. In that instance, maybe you put the wage in the job ad, whereas in another area, in charity, maybe, where remuneration may not be as important. Is that what you're talking about, breaking it up like that?
To an extent, yes, but I think you hit on something really important, especially when you talk about salary and compensation. And it's actually talking about salary and compensation and saying these things are a priority isn't just about saying, I want more. It's about, I want to be able to have the conversation. I want to have the transparency. I want to be working in an organisation where I know, for example, that salary and compensation, there's regular review periods, that actually this is something that we can talk about on a regular basis. I mean, everybody would love more. And the thing about attraction is that really what we're trying to do is tell all our good points. But as consumers of information, we just can't take in that level of information at any one time. So what we're trying to do is help hirers and help organizations focus on those key messages. So doing it in a way that allows them to really focus on what's going to motivate someone. Now, someone in sales and someone in community services say they both want to know how they can get the best out of their salary and compensation packages and what the culture of the organization is like to be talking about salary and compensation.
You sort of hinted at career development as well. Is that a big thing?
Yeah, so this is very interesting in the data. So up until pandemic, absolutely, career development was always number 3. And I'm sure, as you can imagine, that there was more of a focus in those early generations coming through and less of a focus on career development as you are nearing the end of your career. So that, there's a trade-off. All of these elements are a trade-off. But career development had a really healthy sitting at number 3. But when the pandemic happened, what we saw was that career development started to drop off in terms of focus. And what we're seeing in this post-pandemic is actually that, to an extent, people are much more focused on the here and now about what's my work right here, right now. And we're not seeing that same demand within this point in time for people to be focusing on the career development opportunities. Now, that's not to say that at another point in an employee life cycle, now we're just talking attraction, there's also engagement and retention. Now, once you've got people in your organization, career development might be a very strong conversation to keep that motivated person that you've managed to get into your company within your company and growing in your company and, adding value to them and getting them to add value back into your organization.
Okay, final question. The labour market's hot right now. We all know that. How should employers use the laws of attraction data to kind of set themselves apart from their competitors or other businesses trying to attract the same workers?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a great opportunity to differentiate by using the portal, identifying the data, and then doing a reflection internally in your organization and saying, what do we offer for these elements? So if it's work-life balance or career development, or what's the culture of the management? How do we communicate that? When do we communicate that? So really getting tight on identifying, is there an opportunity for us to talk to what we're doing? Then looking at it strategically and saying, is there an opportunity for us to do things that we're not already focused on that would be meaningful to the marketplace? And then getting very pointy within each job ad and with each hiring manager and working through all the interactions and saying, do we talk a consistent story that supports the focus on the right messages at the right time?
Caroline, thank you for talking to Fear and Greed.
Thank you, Sean.
That was Caroline North, Seek's Research Manager for the Laws of Attraction survey. It's well worth a look. Seek is, of course, a great supporter of this podcast. This is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. Join us every morning for the full episode of Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Sean Aylmer. Have a great day.